Hello guys, it is Dane here again, and today it is a very special video on this channel, and I really hope it gets to many people in the community because as the title shows, today I am not alone. We would like to speak about F1 2018 and ideas that we have in our mind, many ideas that we have collected. I am here in a company with Brendon Leigh, with our fantastic eSport champion of the 2017 official Formula 1 eSport. To make this video even more informative and interesting, we would like to get Tiametmarduk's ideas involved too, who made a similar video to this one a few weeks ago, and we really liked his points, but we have some other comments too. So basically we would like to approach these questions from several perspectives. We all know that we have the game in our hand, the community have the right to form it. This video may take long, but if you care about the future of F1 games, we recommend you to stay here and write your thoughts in the comment section after you listen to all the details we mentioned, because Codemasters is really interested in your points, that's 100%. We will talk about general updates in the gameplay, mentioning physics, car settings and many other things. We will talk about career 2 or offline in connection with drivers, celebrations, upgrades, developments, and we will talk about online gameplay of course and ideas too. So many things that you are surely interested in as a big Formula 1 fan. In addition, we will talk about some esport ideas too that we recently discussed in the so-called pro community with finalists, semi-finalists and AOR racers. I really try my best to edit this video as informative, detailed but enjoyable at the same time as it can be, and you know, we all want to beat each other on the track, but we have one objective that is always the same. It is to make the game better. So let's get started with the first question to Brendon. Hello. Firstly, I think we all agree that there won't be a Halo off mode because it's a licensed official game.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
right.
pretty certain the Halo's going to be there. It has to be. But yeah, on PC it's just going to get modded out anyway. Modders are just going to take it out of the game.
But have you ever seen a graphic mod which affected the car graphically rather than just skin? Because I have only seen skin mods, and the Halo off mod would be a quite huge graphical impact, that there is an object what is not there.
I don't know enough about modding to say confidently yes or no, but I somewhat get the feeling that people are quite confident in the community that they would be able to somehow get it off, even if it is just doing something different with it or making it so it blends in a bit more.
Do you think that the leagues will call it as a cheat?
I think there's no way to determine it if it is a cheat, because for it to be, let's say, exposed, you have to upload a video of you driving with it. As we know, for PC side, we legally don't, well, the rules say we don't actually have to upload any footage. But on Xbox and PS4, you can't mod anyway, so we won't go into that. But on PC, there's no way of proving somebody's got the mod or not. So there's no way for a league to rule against it, but I think it would be frowned upon, definitely.
I heard in one of Arrow's videos that earlier stages when the game released, he tried the skin mod and he got kicked. So Codemasters has got already some kind of anti-cheat or anti-mod software which blocks some mods in some ways, so maybe it will be improved and it will be interesting to see. I also don't like Halo. We will have to get used to it. At least in official F1 eSport it will be 100% on the car. So
yeah. For the F1 eSports it will 100% be on the car, but I'm more looking forward to how people find solutions around the Halo, whether it's going to cockpit cam or just sticking it out with T-cam. It's going to be quite interesting to see the different approaches to it.
Real pilots are of course having two eyes. For an example, when you put your hand in front of your eyes very closely, you see behind it because you can watch the objects behind it from two perspectives and your brain renders the image. to make it as clear as possible. But while the cockpit mode in the game is just only one camera view, and you see a whole big object in front of you from cockpit, while real pilots don't see that much because they look behind from the two different perspectives what our eyes render.
The best way of describing it is your nose. If you close one eye, you can see your nose because it's not rendering it out. But if you have both eyes open, you won't see your nose because it's blurring it out from the image. And like you just described, that's exactly what's happening with the Halo. But I think, honestly, it won't be that big of a deal because we will adjust to it pretty quickly. Especially at the top level, the esports level, we will adjust to it.
Wrote some points in connection with career, like car and team upgrades. A lot of people say that resource points should be affected by the result much more than they are now. Like if you have Force India as a rival and you constantly finish in front of them, you should get much more points because in real life they always speak about $1 million, just one position or two position change in the constructors. And we also say that your teammate in career basically does nothing. So he doesn't get any resource points, and even if you are the first pilot, you get some bonus, but you don't work as a team. And on the other hand, it could be taken the online as well, so a co-op season where both of you can earn resource points for the team and one of you is a leader or something like that, and you can choose what to upgrade, but from double amount of resource points, or not double amount, but two people earns it instead of one. And yes, what do you think about that career, or I don't know how much you play offline, but how would you improve this upgrade philosophy or something like that?
Well, like the point you brought up with how one position in the constructors is a lot of money. For example, I think from last position to second to last, it's something like $18 million, I think it is. So it's quite a lot of money in between it. But I think the upgrade points shouldn't be so pronounced during the season, but you should get a big cut of them at the end of the season. So you get much, much less throughout the season and get one big chunk at the end of the season to effectively do your quote winter testing upgrades before next season. And that's where the biggest jump should be. Because at the moment, I find myself getting quite bored of career mode because even if I start out in a Toro Rosso, for example, I'm still faster than Mercedes come Spain, Monaco, because of the upgrades are happening way too quickly.
It's a good point. Other thing is driver personalities. For an example, Kimi Raikkonen and Daniel Ricciardo has the same celebration on the podium. And I think it's not a huge thing to change for Codemasters, just a few more animation added. I think we all agree with that.
The issue with that going forward is the fact that if each driver had their own unique celebration, it takes a lot of work to do one animation for one driver to even lift an arm. For a driver, it takes a lot of work. Then for 20 drivers, do that animation will become very difficult. Then you have to take that into online as well. Then you're effectively assigned a driver when you drive online. So if you're driving for a Toro Rosso, you either have, for a 2017 game, you either have Daniel Kvyat, and then no problem will pop up online. It's the fact that you end up only having that driver assigned to their celebration. For example, like you said, if you brought up Kimi Raikkonen, if you were driving the Ferrari, got Kimi Raikkonen as your assigned driver, you would end up being forced to take his celebration. But if you was, for example, Daniel Ricciardo, and you wasn't a big fan of the Shui or something like that, you're forced to take his celebration as well. So I think if they was to implement it for offline, where each driver has their own unique celebration, it will have to be online, where you have your own pick of celebrations as well.
What about maybe just doing 5 different celebrations, what you can choose from with a button on your wheel, like in GTA 5 or some other games after short races?
I think it'll be a very cool feature at the start of the game. The main issue with that is the consoles, because they're already struggling for button mapping space. It sure would be really cool to see, but it'll take a lot of effort behind the scenes to remap every single button to make sure it works effectively.
It should be only working while you are on the podium and on the throttle or on the brake or left click or right turn or something like that maybe. It's a feature what I definitely think we will see in the future, but there are other things to improve, I wrote up AI and its possible improvements. Like, AI never defends against you, so you always have the inner line to attack. And AI doesn't try a dive bomb, even if it's in the most aggressive 110% level. AI, when he is behind you, doesn't go up to the inside and lock up maybe, and you can do a switchback move against AI. And yes, these are the things that I think. I don't know how hard it is to improve, but AI doesn't even really follow your slipstream while you are in the straight. So, for an example, if I defend the inner line on the middle of the straight, AI usually doesn't come behind me to gain the momentum. What do you think about AI?
I think the AI is such a patchy subject because, for take example, F1 2011, F1 2010, the first two games of their series, well, it is the first two games of their series. The AI has come massive amounts since then, and the AI is improving. Just it's the improvement each year from 2016 to 2017, for example, was huge, and I'm pretty confident for the 2018 AI there'll be another step forward, because sure they don't really have the racecraft or the driver for our caliber anyway, but it's almost impossible for an AI to have the intelligence and the racecraft of an esports driver, because for example Tormala or any esports driver what was in the top 40, we're the top 40 in the world at what we do. So it's pretty much almost impossible for the game developers who are coding the game 8 months in advance to predict what we'll be doing. So it's a really hard subject to scrutinize, but I definitely see your point in behind it, and for sure it'll be nice to see better AI next year, and I'm confident there will be better AI.
I wrote some general speaking points, like the physics, which a lot of people say, but I usually answer that Codemasters goes for a much wider community than, for an example, iRacing or Assetto Corsa, so they can't produce a simulator game, even if they are able to, but they can't and they don't want, because simulator games are for thousands of players, but this game is played by millions, maybe.
The point what I've only really thought up over the last couple of months is Codemasters are making 2 games in advance, basically. That their game, like a couple of years, is always in advance. They're already starting, I'm pretty certain they're already starting their 2019, maybe even 2020 game. But if you think about the stress load of a developer having to make a game each year, iRacing, for example, has just effectively been one big game since 2004, I think it was, or 2008. It's been one big game with continuous updates ever since then. So with Codemasters and their F1 team, they have to make a new game each year. Every single year they've had to make a new game. And sure, they're building upon the baseline what they set last year, but it's not the same concept as iRacing. iRacing, if they have to delay a car release for 2 months, sure, it's upsetting, but nobody cares. Realistically, if Codemasters had to delay their game by 2 months, there would be a massive uproar, and the game sales would go down by about 20%.
Yes, it's an understandable point. Just a few things what I would like to ask to you. What do you think about wet weather and grass? So in wet we don't have paddles, I don't know how to pronounce that word, on the track. So we basically use the same lines and as we are using in dry. And when we go on the grass, it doesn't have as big effect on our gameplay than on real life. But it connects back to my recent point that it would be much harder to drive with paddles on the ground, and it would be much harder to drive if you hit the grass and you just spin instantly. So that's a feature what you would like to see, or you think Codemasters should keep it as it's like that to help more casuals to have a decent speed?
I honestly believe the grass should be much more slippier. It's also one of the biggest things what I get upset about is how the gravel and the grass is so flat. When you go into the gravel or the grass in real life, you're sat there bouncing all over the place, breaking a bit of your wing, for example. But when you're going for the gravel or the grass in game, it's so flat, and sure you lose a bit of traction, but do you get what I mean? It's just you just pretty much glide over the top of it.
Yeah.
And I think if the gravel and the grass was much more uneven in terms of the texture and it was bouncing all over the place, it would sort of add to the fact that you are sliding a lot more. If you go and play games like R Factor, the grass is a lot more slippy than F1 games, but the main factor what's making you spin and hit a barrier is how bumpy the grass is, and that's one of the biggest factors. I think what doesn't have to be improved, but I would like to see improved.
Another thing what gamers usually talk about is the track extending and the penalties. So basically, I believe that regular is way too easy, while strict is totally on the other side of the horse, and Codemasters still haven't found the balance between maybe the two modes. Do you think that?
I would personally say that the strict from 2017 is too easy. I've said to Codemasters personally that people who've played F1 2015 will know what I'm talking about here, but they released a mid-game patch, what was called strict corner cutting rules, and pretty much on every single turn, on every single track, if you went like 2 millimeters over the white line, you got a warning for it. So it was super strict, but super fair. And I feel in this current game and the current system they're using for corner cuts and track extending is a bit inconsistent in the fact that, for example, second to last turn at Kota, if you went a couple millimeters over the white line in qualifying, you get your lap invalidated. But if you go a couple more centimeters wider and keep your throttle full flat, the game doesn't recognize it and you get to keep your lap. And I think that's really something that has to be cracked down on.
So inconsistency is the thing what we agree with. There are some corners where you extend the track. For an example, Melbourne third sector first chicane. You go wide to the grass, you even lose the back end of the car, you lose like 2/10 and you still get a penalty, for an example, instantly. While in the real life, pilots would be happy to survive if they go wide there.
Yeah, and I think the biggest difference is in real life, there's much slipperier grass, for example, going back to the point earlier, so they lose more time while going outside, so that's why the stewards don't penalise them. Plus, the risk of damage to a car in real life is quite big when you're bouncing over the curb and bouncing over the grass. So that's why they don't penalise them. But in game, we don't lose enough time for the game to think it's acceptable, if that makes any sense. So I think, going back to the point earlier, if the grass and the off track was much more slippier, especially AstroTurf, it would almost take away that sort of inconsistency because we wouldn't ever go out there. At the moment, I'm going to be completely honest, the reason we go out there off the track is because we can. As soon as we're scared to go out of the track boundaries, we won't ever do it.
Another point is tire degradation and temperature importance. So for an example, Codemasters implicated formation left in the game, but I realized that tire temperature and brake temperature means basically nothing. When your engine gets very hot, it wears in a higher amount and it loses performance as well. So engine temperatures are important, at least that's what I feel. But in quali, I usually feel that the tires are the best when I do the slowest outlap that I can do, and they are cold, they are blue, but I still have the best grip with them. And it's another thing what is a little bit argumentable. I find out non-existing words in English, but okay, so if you implicate tire degradation and temperature to a higher level, maybe casual players lose their interest of playing this game because in real life, real pilots, real teams suffer a lot with keeping the tires at the right temperature, but this game is totally on the other side of that, so we don't have to mind about anything in connection with the tire temperatures.
Yeah, I definitely think there's an element of it trying to make the game accessible to everybody, but I would also defend the point, well, attack the point this is, in the sense that the casual players use tractor control and ABS and stability control and all the assists that are in the game to help make them better at the game effectively. So I would argue the point that they don't actually exceed their tyre wear and their tyre temperature boundaries, because if we're honest, it's only really when we start locking up or wheel spinning is when our tyre tyre temps go through the roof. So I think, honestly, I don't think it would affect the casual players if the tyre temperatures were more sensitive, same as the brakes. I think if it did become more sensitive for esports drivers, it would be a massive improvement across the board. There's a big thing on iRacing and R Factor of people are so motivated to go and play the game because they want to get better at it. And on F1, you don't see that, do you? You just see it in sprint mode where people just get in the game, and because they're only 1 second for pace, they find that acceptable. Whereas on iRacing, R Factor, Set Corsa, people are about 4 seconds off the pace and they want to get better. And that's where they put their own time into it. And I think that's the biggest difference.
Here you basically need less skills to learn that game. You mean that? In the esport qualifying, there was a lot of qualifier from totally other games, and from Race Room, from iRacing, and from other games, and they just get into the game with some skills already got in driving, and they instantly master that game. So basically, if you are talented and if you know how to find the braking points, the cornering speed, the right setups, you learn this game pretty easily and you don't see other challenges. You mean that?
Yeah, it's if you're skilled at a baseline, for example, if you're skilled at iRacing or all the games you just mentioned, it's very easy just to jump in another simulator or another racing game and just be fast straight away because you have that natural raw instinct and skill to brake late and all the talents that go above with it.
Okay, a lot of player wrote that it's not a huge point and I don't really mind it, but tire degradation. For an example, in 2011, you could see how the tires wear out a little bit visually as well, but it just totally lost its form. And for an example, we can't split the 70% worn tire and the 0% graphically speaking. Do you think it would be a right change to maybe see if your tire is very worn and you have that blistering on its side, or it's just a very little graphical addition?
Well, I think definitely more graphical additions is much better for the game. Everything what adds detail to a game is much better, and I'd love to see blistering come to the game. I'd love to see lockups, well, flat spots, I mean, come into the game in a visual effect, especially as well as in a physical effect. That'd be really cool to see lockups actually affect you. But more detail is always better, so that's just the way I look at it.
What do we think about slipstream? For an example, my opinion is that the turbulent air effect it's quite strong in the fast corners, but in the straight line speed difference there is a huge difference compared to real life in the game. So we lose time now in the corners. It's much harder to overtake. In 2016 it was too easy and it was very bad. Now it's challenging and enjoyable. But on the other hand, if you run just a little bit lower wings compared to the attacker behind, you are basically unovertakeable. Or slipstream doesn't have as big effect in the straights as in real life. I guess we all agree with that, and the wing is a big difference. And I also don't feel the contrast in slipstream between being very very close and being a little bit further behind, because in real life, if you are like half second ahead of a McLaren Honda, which is not a McLaren Honda in this year but last year, and you are a Williams, you won't be overtaken. But if that McLaren Honda with Alonso is very very close, he can also reach like 10 plus kilometer per hour, and he can do the overtake. In the game, I feel that the slipstream is very constant, and I don't feel the difference between being very, very close and being a little bit further behind. And if I have the higher wings, I just can't do anything against it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think when you're just about, let's say, 1.3 seconds away, that's when you should be, let's say 2 seconds actually, because I think that's more realistic. When you're 2 seconds away, that's when you should start picking up a bit of slipstream. And you sort of see maybe a 1 or 2 miles an hour difference at the top of your straight line speed. Let's say China, for example, let's use that for a reference. You start to see 1 or 2 miles an hour at on when you're 2 seconds away. But as soon as you get into that 1 second window, it should become more pronounced, but not so that you just close straight up into the back of somebody. at the moment, I think once you're in 1 second of somebody, it's so easy just to stick with them. You could probably put it down to stand on the lean throughout the middle sector, and you'll still just catch straight back to them on the straight, because that's how easy I think it is to stick with them in DRS. I think once you're within 1 or 2 temps of somebody, or let's say 4 temps at maximum, that's when it really should up its ante, and you should really start closing a huge amount.
I wrote up some online points. Everybody mentions like determined about that, so that codemasters are really working hard to prevent like as its form. So it's no need to say. I think they also know it. Tiametmarduk in his video advised official servers. Do you think it can be a thing that helps maybe pro racers, leagues, advanced pilots to have better races, or what do you think about like
Private servers are a great idea, but the community isn't big enough to have it viably paid for. Even if we're paying like $10 for a private server, AOR isn't going to really want to pay that every week, because if you think about that, 10 times 20 for a whole season, that's a lot of money at the end of a season for just one split. But I think definitely private servers would be really cool, but I just think it's not right for this community to have private servers. I think maybe at the moment, I believe they're using peer-to-peer connection. Maybe 1 or 2 steps up from that. I don't know what it's called because I'm not that great. I'm not that big on the networking side of stuff. So maybe 1 or 2 steps up from that. I think, take example from iRacing. I think iRacing has the best servers at the moment in any racing game. So I think take inspiration from iRacing and see where we go from there.
here ghost cars also come in the scenes, because in earlier games when somebody started to lag, it became a ghost in 95%, but in this game there has been a huge amount of cases where somebody broke his front wing because of lag, and the front player who lagged or he who lagged behind doesn't become ghost. So do you think that laggers should be ghost instantly, or what do you think about ghost cars basically in the game?
I don't think people who lag should be put into a ghost car instantly, because if you think about it from a competitive standpoint, if I'm stuck behind a slower driver what I can't overtake, oh, quickly I'll just turn on something else on my Wi-Fi, I'll become a ghost car, go straight past him. Oh, quickly when I'm past him, I'll put my connection back to normal. If you think about that from a competitive side, it would be quite abused quite heavily and quite easily. But I think what iRacing does is the best way, from what I've seen personally, is the best way that somebody implemented it when somebody lags. And I don't know if you've seen it on iRacing, but what happens when somebody starts lagging, when their ping goes over 200 or 300, I can't remember exactly what it is, their car will almost be put into its own server until your connection settles down.
Okay, online. Crossplay. It's another thing what everybody says, but we don't really know the technology behind it.
It's never going to happen. Never will ever happen.
Then just speak about the differences between console and PC, and the players on console and the players in PC, and the esport qualifying, because basically now all of the players in esport top 5, or nearly all of the players, or the top 10 or just the top 20 came to PC, but I don't know how will the qualifying go next year. You may know it and you may not able to speak about it, but do you think that there should be a solution to maximally equal the two games on console and on PC, or the 3 games actually, if we count consoles as 2 different games, or just keep it like that and have always like 10-10-10 or 15-15 or 5-5-5, but maybe even the 10th fastest PC player is faster than the 3rd PS4 player, and then esport is not completely fair. What do you think about that?
Well, I personally think the system they have at the moment is the best well-rounded solution. Each console, as of last season, had 13 slots available. You had 10 slots available for your event sign up for Monza and Suzuka. Then you had 3 spots per console to do your AOR league sign up. So 13 each console, then 1 wild card who got entered into the actual semi final. But I think that was the best solution going forward because realistically, if you look at a lot of the PC players, they're sort of, I wouldn't call it abusing, but they're definitely using this loophole in the rule book, I would call it. For example, Jemba Labassi, he didn't enter through the PC split, through the PC side, what he was originally playing on. So he jumped over to his PS4 and got into the event that way. And as we all know, he got through to the final of the F1 Esports. I think that's a loophole in the rule book, but it's impossible to fix it.
Spectator mode and replay, even multiplayer races. I definitely believe that. I don't know, again, we speak about things what we don't know on the technological side, but nearly every other games, Assetto Corsa, iRacing have the option to replay multiplayer races from every perspective what you would like to watch. And in Codemaster game, you can replay offline races from any pilot's perspective, but you can't replay multiplayer races. You can't see accidents from different perspectives. You can't do it. What do you think about it?
I think we definitely need that feature in as soon as possible because one, for the F1 Esports, I'm thinking from a broadcaster standpoint here, if there was a crash mid-race and they wanted to sort of emphasize that at the end of the race, that's the only way to go back and look at the crash, if you see what I mean there. And especially for league races who, for example, my PC at the moment isn't good enough to run the game smoothly. When I do try to record or play an F1, I get input lag, I get frame drops throughout the race. So I can't record during the race. And for me, it would be a lot better to be able to go back after the race and then record my instance when it doesn't matter. Because at the moment I literally cannot report people because of it.
Another multiplayer feature, ranking system, which was implicated in the earlier games after it was turned off, after it's in again, but only in sprint modes, in official servers or something like that. I have never tried it, so I don't know what I'm speaking about. But custom lobbies doesn't have ranking system. Do you think that ranking or maybe some kind of driver rating, not as serious maybe as in iRacing, or safety rating or something would make the online community better, to stick more to the game, cleaner, motivated, or something like that?
I think it's a must as soon as possible that we have a safety rating at minimum because at the moment, the biggest issue of online, let's say if I join a player lobby for 25% raise, 15 people, I don't know out of those 15 people who are dirty or not, who are going to take me out on purpose or not. And I think, for example, if we had a safety rating, let's say some random person had a 4.0 safety rating when the best you have is 5, I can trust that guy to be clean, well, cleaner than most people. But if somebody had like a 0. Like half a safety rating or something, I know that guy's a bit dodgy, maybe, and I don't particularly want to go near him. And I think at the moment, we just come into turn 1 and get completely destroyed by like 5 cars, don't we? And we don't know who to avoid.
Yes, it's true, but for an example, iRacing, you get incidents points as well when they crash you from behind. So if you don't do anything, but you are always unlucky, your safety rating also goes down. And
I think, yeah, that is a loophole in the iRacing system, and if F1 was to bring it into their system, it would be a loophole. But generally, it doesn't really affect the drivers at the top because 9 times out of 10, you see the people with the best safety ratings are driving at the top, and they're not being stupid and moving around on the straights or braking early. They respect each other, and you see people who are leading races or battling for podiums, they don't really rear-end each other. It's only the people at the back of the pack that start rear-ending each other, so at the top it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, and I think safety rating, if they implicate that, it should be something to count it per laps and not per races. Because for an example, you have a better chance to have a collision or a track extend or some kind of little contact in a 100% race than on a 3 lap long race. And if somebody plays just longer races, 90% he will get more safety rating incidents. I
Yeah,
think
that's how it works in iRacing. To my knowledge, if you're doing let's say a 40-minute race and you only have 18 incident points, that's the way iRacing does it. You'll get more of a bonus compared to if you did a 10-minute race and the same incident points. So
okay.
I completely agree with you.
Again, a little bit of ghosting system. Do you think that yellow flag when a car is on the side of the track and or it blocks the racing line, it should be ghost or it should stay realistic and you have to go around it somehow and you have to solve that problem or just go through it?
No, it has to stay realistic. It has to be a solid object because there's almost, it loses the sense of racing when somebody spins in front of you and it just becomes a ghost car. It looks silly on stream. It is silly to drive. Do you get, if you see what I mean by that? And it has to stay realistic and stay as a solid object for us to respect the game. It has to stay a solid object.
Yes, and what about maybe to do it optional on the settings to enable ghosts or disable? I think it's not a hard thing to program for Codemasters.
Yeah, I think it should be an option in the menus that if somebody calls a yellow flag, it either ghosts or not ghosts. And I think that's the way to go forward on it.
A lot of players write that. What I always laugh about, but maybe you see it from another perspective, that Codemasters should implicate some kind of journey. For an example, starting from go-kart, going to Formula 2000, and after F2, and after F1 finally to a lower team, and after a bigger team in career. There are many other games that do that. For an example, Forza, Project Cars. You can do it wherever you want. But I always laugh about that because this game is the official Formula 1 game and it's just Formula 1 in my eyes. But what do you think about the journey option? And it's hard work.
Well, the point I'm going to make here is, one, it would be extremely cool to start in go-karts and go through all the formulas, but you said it's the official licensed Formula 1 game, not a Formula 2 game. And also, another fact is, people brought up Project Cars and they start saying, oh, why can't F1 do it? I can't remember the exact years, but it's been something like 2, 3, maybe 4 years since Project Cars 1 to Project Cars 2. And if we're all honest, the Project Cars career mode isn't that great, if you're honest. So it's pretty much, I don't think it's going to happen. And if it did happen, the game cost would have to go up to about £70 because they would have to employ so much more staff, and so much more staff to make the game yearly, to happen every year. Then you have to think about all the tracks. One track, let's say Nürburgring, there's just a GP layout, that takes about a year of man time to make. If one person was to do it, it takes a year to make, apparently, or something like that. So if you think about all the different tracks that lower formulas go to, then have to add that onto the Formula 1 tracks that they're doing at the moment, it would be an impossible task to do every single year. Literally impossible.
Yes, it's a hard work, and that's what the community usually forget. Another thing is in connection with the skins. And you are in esports and cars, now I'm in Veloce esports, and in future events we would like to use our own skins instead of a Red Bull skin or a Ferrari skin, but as we mentioned it earlier on, it's an official, it's a licensed game.
Yeah, it can't happen.
But on the other hand, maybe Liberty Media or Formula 1 or the leaders should take it a little bit easier in that point, because if esports team have their own sponsors, they should get it somehow on the car. And for an example, in iRacing, you can customize your own design. And it has always been controversial whether it is possible or not. I don't know. What do you know about it?
The key difference between Formula 1 and other games is Formula 1 has 20 teams, 10 teams, sorry, my bad there, 10 teams that all agree upon that somebody can put whatever they want on the car. For example, they can start putting rude images on the car. Every team has to agree to that. Whereas on iRacing, let's take McLaren, for example, all they have to do is agree with McLaren to say that they can edit the liveries. So if you think about this from a commercial standpoint, let's take Mercedes, for example. They would have to go to Mercedes and say, okay, can we change your livery in game? Then they would have to go to every single sponsor what Mercedes has and say, is this acceptable? So if you think about that for 10 teams, it's quite a lot of work.
Yeah, but maybe we should get closer to this point by changing the rules. Don't you think that?
I can't agree more. The fact that if we had our own esports team sponsors all over the car, it would be the coolest thing, especially for league races. It would be the coolest thing to watch the stream back, because you'd see esports plus cars battling Alonso's team, battling your team in our own liveries, and that would be the coolest thing ever. And especially added on to that fact, we'd have proper teammates at that point, and not just a teammate. It would be a proper teammate in the sense that you would be paired with like TRL Limitless, or not TRL Limitless, but Limitless anyway, in your actual esports team. I would be partnered with Marcel in esports plus cars, and Jem would probably be teammates with like Topa in Alonso's racing team, and it would just add so much more to the stream.
Yes, but Formula One always stayed in the history and stayed very strict about these rules, but Liberty Media tries to make them easier. So for an example, now Lewis Hamilton was very happy last year because he could post much more on his Instagram and on his other accounts from inside events during the weekend, what he wasn't able to do in the past other years in Bernie Eccleston era. So it's already getting a little bit
looser, not as
looser.
Not as
but it's still, for me, to change actual sponsors seem to be a little bit far. But one point it has to happen, I guess. Not for an example next year, but one point it has to.
It has to happen 1 year, but I don't think it's going to be this year or next year.
Pit stops. I wrote out pit stops, like Tiametmarduk in his video mentioned, and I think we all completely agree with that. Then when we are at the very end of the quali, we would like to just go in, set a new tire, instantly fuel in the car with a very low amount of fuel, and go out and get it before the checkered flag and start our final lap. It would be absolutely amazing if we don't have a minute-long animation.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times, especially in qualifying, for example, league races, we already know what setup we're doing. We already know every single detail. We're literally going into the garage, getting pushed back for 30 seconds, waiting 10 seconds for the animation to come up so we can change the tyres, closing that again, waiting another 10 seconds, and actually have to wait another 30 seconds for it to go off the jacks and out the pit lane. And I completely agree. If there was like a preset option where before qualifying or in the menus that we could say, okay, in qualifying, only swap, if we press this button combination, just swap tyres, put some more fuel in and go out. And I think also a quick pit stop would have to be implemented in qualifying as well. Because if it's raining and we've got enough fuel to do a couple more laps, we want to come in, swap to dry tyres in a race style pit stop and go straight back out, not have to wait an extra minute.
Yes, so we agree with that. A lot of people want pit control and go in the pit with their own control device and go to the team and not just engage the clutch and the pit limiter to have full 100% control in the pit. What do you think about it?
I think it would be very cool if it was had the stewards in the sense that we wasn't allowed to piss about in the pit lane and we was forced to keep somewhat sensible rules in the pit lane, so we were not allowed to start weaving about in the pit lane. But yeah, I think it would be extremely cool to have that scene in the game, but I don't know if it's going to be in the game for a little while.
We talked about a lot of things. You may, yes, a thing what I never mentioned in my videos, but I always wanted your fuel plan. I absolutely like that. That in a 25% races, I think we should have 25% of fuel out of the
Yeah.
105 kilograms. In 50%, we should have 50% of fuel and maybe more fuel modes than 3 in a race and 4 in the quali. Maybe you could explain it a little bit wider or in detail, or
Yeah.
how you think
So
that?
my view on it is, in real life and in a 100% race, we're limited to 105 kilograms of fuel. That's literally the maximum we put in the car. So I feel for 50% races and 25% races, we should be limited to the race distance. So for 50%, we have 50% of that fuel level, so 52.5 kilograms of fuel available to use, and for 25, so and so. For example, on a 25% race, I can't describe how many times I've literally just overfueled the car and just ran rich all the time. I can't describe how many times I've done that. And I think it adds so much more skill in being able to short shift, lifting coast to maximize your fuel. At the moment, we don't have to do it.
Yeah, in USA, I started with 60 kilograms of fuel, while if it would be realistic, I could only start with 52.5, which is like 4 laps difference or
Yeah,
more.
and
And
it's a big
it's a
thing,
massive impact.
and it also changes the way you approach each race. For example, Monza, I think, is the heaviest on its fuel, so you have to start managing it from lap 3 onwards, and then it sort of changed the way that you try to get out of DRS. At the moment, we just push as 100% to get out of DRS, but we don't really have a consequence of that, do we? If we was pushing and using our fuel to get out of DRS, that could come back to haunt us later in the race, and it just adds so much more of a strategy element to it.
And after our league race, we talked about fuel modes, and you told that you want a little bit more. I also
Yeah,
want a little bit more to not have as much big difference between standard and lean and rich.
yeah. I think what the problem I have with the fuel modes at this very moment in time in the game is, for example, if you're driving Monza, you'll see people push the fuel rich, put the fuel to rich during the straights and put it down to lean for traction in the turns. I feel like the power from each mode is pretty good at the moment. So rich has a good amount of power, lean has a decent amount of power loss in comparison. I think there should be more fuel modes, so you can't do that. Because it's something what does upset me a lot is us being able to go from rich to lean to get traction. I don't think that should be something we can do, and it is quite annoying to see people do it.
I also mentioned overtake button, which is in real life, but you told that in consoles the mapping is very hard to the buttons.
Yeah, on consoles, I think they're pretty much used up all their mapping space on the wheel. On PC, it wouldn't be an issue because we have loads of buttons available to us, but on console, I don't think they'll be able to do it. Plus, at the moment, there's very little point in having the overtake button because we can switch from lean to rich within half a second maximum. So at this moment in time, it wouldn't be that essential. But if we was to bring in more fuel modes, like I was just saying, it would become essential because you can't switch from the lowest fuel mode to the highest within half a second, and you would have to press that button.
Featured races, that's another point that Tiametmarduk mentioned, to maybe another way to keep the community playing it more or something like that.
So, sorry, what do you mean by featured races?
Like more we already have a few events, and we saw that, for an
Oh,
example, on the official esport event there was like 67,000 participants, if it's right, or that's what
yeah.
I heard actually. Maybe some other things that could keep the players in game more, like new skins, objectives, achievements, a little bit better implicated. Uh, do you have any ideas about that, or have you ever thought about that?
I think for the general player, it would be quite good, but for 90% of the players, we wouldn't care about it because I've honestly never loaded up a game and thought, today I'm going to go get this achievement. I've literally never done it. I know people who do it, but I've never had the incentive to go onto a game and go achievement hunting, so to speak. So for some people it would be really cool, but for other people it just wouldn't matter.
So I have the same opinion about that. So I never cared about the achievements, and I never cared about even the helmet design because
Yeah,
I usually watch the apex and the track in front of me, and I try to be just the fastest.
yeah.
But a lot of
I
people
prefer
still
to look at
rides
the
there.
track. I prefer to look at the track and not my helmet. So
Yeah. Uh, I basically lost out of points. We mentioned Halo, physics, online, offline, drivers, development, modes, journey, everything basically. So, do you have any other thing to say?
each year the game's getting better and better. In terms of like the physics online, it's getting a bit better each year. I think this year will be the biggest step between the games we've ever seen before because of esports. But I know Codemasters are working exceptionally hard this year because of esports. I think this is going to be quite a big gap between 2017 and 2018 in terms of how the game plays. I think 2018 is going to be the best game yet.
I believe that too, and let's mention a little bit of price. A lot of people always talk about the price and it is expensive or something like that. I don't agree with that. In Hungary, we have one of the lowest amount of salary averagely in Europe, but still I can afford that game, and I think who is a big fan of Formula One can afford it too. We just have to compare it to maybe other games, to iRacing or Project Cars, which is even more expensive. You have to buy like
Yeah.
every track, every DLC. This game is not expensive for 1 year.
Like for me, I don't think I'm ever going to fully invest in iRacing costs. For example, just to do your road, like just normal track stuff in terms of GT and F1, it's about £700 to get all your content ready, if not 1,000, just get all your content there. But then you have to pay £15 each 3 months for your membership. And if you think about it, your membership alone for iRacing, after a year, it's pretty close to your Formula One cost for each year. So it's not that bad when you think about it.
They are doing big development, and
And you said the main point there was the update to free. I'm pretty certain, if you think about it, every time iRacing updates the car, every time a new car comes out on iRacing, it's a lot of money just to get that one car. So it does add up. And F1 does a good job with their pricing, in my opinion.
a last point that just came in my mind. It's a little bit in graphical view. I think, as an esport pilot, we don't mind that much of graphic. We want to be fast, and we look the track instead of our wings or our cockpit or our helmets. But some people say that it would be fantastic if every car has got like 2 or 3 different designs on his front wing or on its rear wing. For an example, in Monza, we see that the Mercedes comes with a much different rear wing, a much flapper one, to prevent the drag in the straights. While in Monaco, we have every small detailed winglets all around the car. And in graphic, we have the same car in Monza as well, and in Monaco as well. On the game, it's again an improvement which is hard to do because it takes much time to make every graphic elements to be available on different tracks. But some people say that it would make the game a little bit more quality. Again, just a little bit more interesting to see how your car changes graphically after improvements, for an example, in career mode or in other ways.
Yeah, for sure. It'll bring a lot to the game in terms of aesthetics and making it look much better. Often the game comes out just before Spa or on the Spa race weekend. So if you think about it at this point, how can they predict the Monza layout of the wings? The game would have only just come out, and it's literally impossible. It would be literally impossible to have the Monza spec car for 10 cars ready within a couple of weeks. of it coming out. It would be literally impossible.
Yeah. Maybe as a patch, or maybe not the design, maybe just the angle of the wings, that it goes
Yeah,
a little bit. I don't know what you know what I mean.
it is a lot of work.
Yeah, and we always have to remember what we mentioned many times, that this game comes out in every year, so we can't ask things that would be when there would be needed like 100,000 employees in Codemasters, because they don't have
Yeah.
that capacity. They are trying their best, and we have to focus on smaller things that really make the game experience better, compared to just these few things that you might not even realize.
What people need to realize is what what they're dreaming about and what the reality of it is, and I think they have to split the two very decisively before they can look to the future.
Yes.
Because I think at the moment they're dreaming of having a full career mode. That's a dream. In reality, it's never going to happen.
Maybe if somebody starts now a game and releases it in 2030, in
Yeah.
15 years time, or actually just 12, quick maths. So maybe it can happen, but for a game which is licensed and it has to be ready at every autumn, every year, it won't happen.
Bring in. So, for example, I don't know if you played it, but F1 2015 had the 2014 season in the game. People have touched upon before wanting that to come back, and often my reply to that is, when do you play last year's game? Well, last season card. I played it about twice in the 2015 lifespan.
I
I
never
think,
played it, but I played with 2015.
yeah, you get what I mean, don't you? You don't really play with it. And the same with classic cars at this point. They're cool to have, and I've done a few videos driving them. But it's not really something you invest your time into, is it?
Then one last question. Pad versus wheel. Pad is OP in rain, a little bit slower than wheel in dry, but still we drive our cars with the wheel instead of a pad because it's realistic. It should stay like that, or should they help pad players a little bit more in dry, or how do you think the balance of these two controlling
Well,
devices would go?
honestly, I personally don't believe that the pad is bad in the dry. I just don't think the people are maximizing the pad. Like, for example, Limitless is a very, very, very good driver. But if you think about it, he's racing against a Flying Finn or Sully on the Xbox division, and just to beat Sully alone on equal equipment isn't easy. It's a very difficult task
Yes, he is
to
an
do
esports
that.
finalist, I guess.
Yeah, and if we're on, JD didn't even qualify for the esports. I don't mean any disrespect to him on that front, but he didn't qualify for it. So, in my opinion, at this very moment in history, it's not a fair comparison between the two. I don't mean that any disrespect to JD, but that's just the way I look at it.
Yeah, and uh, to go further, uh, in 2016, I had many world records all around in time trial. I wasn't a slow pilot, and still in rain, I was slower than a keyboard pilot, and everybody else in our Hungarian league got about 20 seconds from a keyboard pilot. And I just, to be honest, I don't know how to keep it fair, but I can't accept when I try my best to save a little bit of salary, to buy a new wheel, to make me faster, to make it more realistic, to have me control the car more accurately. And why
Well,
a keyboard pilot just beats me. It's very hard to just admit to yourself that you were the slower pilot in skills, or he had the better conditions.
well, I've done so much testing on this when the game first came out of driving with the pad and driving the wheel, and I can't confirm it, but I'm 99% sure the pad has ABS and traction control. Not all the way, but maybe for like the first 25% of your input, there's traction control and ABS. Because on the wheel, I think we could both agree on this. It's really difficult in the first like initial acceleration, isn't it? Coming out the turn, it's quite difficult at that point. And the same as the braking, is when you first slam on the brakes, it is quite easy to lock up. And I think on the pad, you can visibly see from the throttle trace and the brake trace on the bottom right hand of the screen, they just slam down the throttle and slam down the brake.
Yeah, and I have I saw Limitless mastering Monza video like 3 weeks ago when he was in heavy rain, and he told that he brakes at the same time in heavy rain compared to dry because he approaches the corner slower. But however I approach that corner, for an example, first corner in Monza, which is a very hard braking point in rain especially, I can't brake in the same time, and I need to brake like 30 meters earlier compared to the pad, which is unbelievable.
And it shows the pad does have ABS, because that's where the strongest part of ABS is in the rain, isn't it? And he's able to exploit that to its maximum.
Yes, we agree with that then. It was a very long talk. I don't know how I will edit that.
Good luck.
But we say that Brendon Leigh is in esports and cars, and he has got an own YouTube channel too, so I will link it in the description and in the comment section as well. And I really appreciate that you have been here and we talked about the game in detail, because I think we need to do that, because I'm sure that a few Codemasters workers may watch this video or may not, but still we show our opinion and show our interest to the community and to the company as well, and I think it's the way to help the game developers as well and to help the development, because if we stay just quietly, they don't maybe know what to do. I know that you write them messages, you have the right to do that and you have the chance to do that because they pay attention to you. And to some other esport pilots as well, and I think it's very important. So if the viewers have any points, they should write it to the Twitter or to comment section. I think it's very important to share our ideas, to not keep Codemasters alone, because even if we want to beat each other on the track, we still have the main objective to make the game better and to make it the most enjoyable as we can do. So, really appreciate that you have been here.
Oh, no, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.